My mother walked into the house I bought, while holding my 5-week-old daughter, and told me I was too exhausted to keep it under my own control. She brought my sister, my father, and my brother-in-law with storage bins, baby supplies, and a plan. They called help. What they did not know was that a listing printout for my grandmother's house had already exposed the real reason they wanted me distracted. By the time they came back to take over, Adult Protective Services was waiting in my dining room, and every paper they had touched had started talking. Chapter 1. The House I Bought. While everyone counted me out by the time most people are driving home to dinner, I'm usually the one standing in a dim hallway with a paper chart in one hand and a phone in the other, trying to decide whether to call a daughter now or let her have 10 more minutes before I tell her her mother is gone. I'm Corinne Mercer. I'm 37, a hospice RN with Lakeview Hospice and Palliative Network, and for most of my adult life I have been the person people trust when a room gets quiet in the worst possible way. I know what it means when breathing changes by half a beat. I notice pupils before anyone else does. I see the way fingers cool from the nail beds down. I hear it in the voice first, that tiny flattening that says someone is preparing to leave, or someone else is preparing to lie. Hospice trains you to recognize slow dying. It also teaches you that families can rot the same way. Not all at once, not dramatically, soft spots first. Then the structure gives. When I had that thought, I was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor of my new house, in Lisle, Illinois, with my 5-week-old daughter asleep against my chest and a half-open box of kitchen towels beside me. The place still smelled faintly like fresh paint and cardboard. Afternoon light came through the front window and landed on the African violet on the sill, the one I'd carried through 3 apartments and 1 furnished rental. And one bad year after another. A patient's family gave me that violet in 2018 after their mother died. Mrs. Alvarez had loved purple, and after the funeral her daughters pressed the pot into my hands and told me some things bloom again, even after you think they're finished. I almost killed it twice. It kept coming back. I kept looking at it like proof that I had made it here. The house wasn't huge. It was a bright little craftsman-style townhouse with clean trim, pale siding, and windows big enough to make the rooms feel honest. It cost $412,000, which still made my throat tighten when I said it in my head. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't the kind of house my sister would post with a caption about timeless finishes and elevated flow. But it was mine. Mine on paper, mine in law, mine with my name signed page after page after page on May 20th, 2024. While my daughter was still so new her head fit in my palm. I found out I was pregnant in July of 2023. The biological father is Noah Pritchard, 38, a medical device sales rep who knew exactly how to sound sincere for short stretches of time. We were together long enough for me to believe he might stay if things got hard, which in retrospect was less a love story than a failure of pattern recognition on my part. He left when I was 10 weeks pregnant. Not with a dramatic fight, not with a confession, just with that polished cowardice some men mistake for kindness. A few texts after that. You okay? Been thinking about you. I'm just in a complicated place right now. He made himself blurry on purpose. That hurt, but not in the way people assume. The sharpest pain wasn't Noah leaving. It was watching my family absorb his exit like evidence in a case they had been building against me for years. See? Corinne chose wrong. Corinne trusted wrong. Corinne is too emotional, too independent, too much not enough. Pick a contradiction. My family always did. My mother, Elaine Mercer, is 64 and beloved at St. Mark's Community Church. If you need a meal train organized, a silent auction assembled, a fundraiser chaired, a prayer circle activated, my mother can make it happen before most people finish their coffee. Women touch her arm when they talk. Men call her a saint. She knows everyone's dietary restrictions and preferred Bible translation and exactly how to lower her voice so concern sounds holier than control. My father, Thomas Mercer, is 66, semi-retired, and manages a small portfolio of rental properties and investments. He believes in peace the way some people believe in oxygen. Necessary at any cost. He has spent his whole life choosing calm over truth, even when calm was just truth with the volume turned down. My sister Vivian Hart is 40 and has the life my mother understands. She owns a high-end kitchen design studio, wears expensive neutrals, and somehow always looks like she just stepped out of a showroom where no one has ever spilled juice on anything. She was the golden child in our family. Though no one ever said it out loud, because in families like mine, the hierarchy stays cleaner if it remains implied. Her husband, Graham Hart, is 43 and a licensed wealth advisor at Hartwell Ridge Advisory Group. He has the kind of voice people hand their retirement accounts to, measured, warm, impossible to pin down. He talks about trusts and IRAs and long-term planning, like those subjects are moral virtues. And then there was me, the one they called when someone needed a ride home after surgery, the one asked to stay overnight with sick kids, the one who cleaned out refrigerators after funerals and packed away casseroles, and sat with old women in emergency rooms, because everyone else was too busy. I was useful in a crisis. I was dependable in the background. But I was never invited into the room where decisions got made. That became very clear when I started buying this house. I did it pregnant. Swollen ankles, compression socks, charting at midnight, then scanning pay stubs and bank statements on my days off. I pulled together tax returns, credit reports, verification letters, every boring grown woman document that proves your life is structurally sound. I did all of it while carrying a baby. Everyone seemed to think automatically disqualified me from being taken seriously. Malik Turner, the mortgage specialist, never said anything cruel enough to report. That almost made it worse. He was polite, efficient, always smiling with his customer service voice. But every few conversations there it was, the slight tilt. Do you have family support in place? Are you sure you want to close this soon after delivery? Would you be more comfortable waiting a few months until things stabilize? Things stabilize, as if my child and I were weather. I remember saying, I am comfortable closing on the date we agreed to. He gave me a pause on the phone. Not rude, just doubtful. I knew that pause. I'd heard versions of it my whole life. At closing, Avery Sloane slid the stack of papers toward me in a quiet office in Lisle, while Ivy slept in her car seat beside my chair. She was tiny then, all warm cheeks and startled sighs. My body still didn't feel fully mine. My hand shook from lack of sleep when I signed, but I signed every page. Corinne Mercer, Corinne Mercer, Corinne Mercer. No co-borrower, no husband, no parent, no rescue attached. Avery glanced at the baby, then back at me, and said, "You're doing a big thing today." It was such a simple sentence I almost cried over it, because she meant it plainly. Not as a warning. Not as doubt dressed up like advice, just a fact. I moved in and kept moving, because that's what women like me do. We keep moving. Janelle Brooks from work texted almost every day after Ivy was born. Janelle is our charge nurse, practical and funny and incapable of fake comfort. She sent me messages at odd hours that said things like, "How many hours of sleep, and be honest, and I'm dropping soup on your porch, don't argue." She was the closest thing I had to a chosen sister. At Lakeview, there was also a possible opening coming up for lead bereavement liaison, maybe case coordinator if administration did what administration always does, and merged two jobs into one title. A few people thought I was too soft for it. That always amused me. People confused gentleness with poor observation. In my line of work, the soft ones are often the ones who see first. I learned that from one of my earliest patients, Mr. Kowalski. He had end-stage heart failure, and his wife sat beside him every afternoon, with a crossword book she never really looked at. She noticed every flicker in him. Not because she was loud about loving him, but because she had spent decades paying attention. One day, she touched his hand and looked at me and said, "It's different today." She was right. He died that night. Love isn't the person with the biggest voice in the room. It's the person who notices the hand trembling before anyone else does. That thought stayed with me. In the first weeks after bringing Ivy home, especially when my family started calling more. My mother was the main one. 3 calls one day, 2 the next, then a text if I didn't answer quickly enough. She said all the right things in the wrong tone. You need real support around you. A baby needs proper routine. I just worry because with your schedule, hospice is so intense. Do you have a spare key somewhere? That one she tried to make sound casual. Vivian texted too, but hers felt foggier, like she was being pulled by a current she didn't entirely make. Let me know if you need anything. Mom's just concerned. The baby really should be around family more. Graham thinks structure would help. Graham thinks. Of course he did. My dad kept his messages harmless, the way he always does when he wants to stay technically innocent. Your mother just loves you. She means well, call when you can. The thing about families like mine is they rename control until it becomes almost impossible to challenge. Surveillance becomes care. Criticism becomes wisdom. Invasion becomes help. The day before everything started to feel different, my mother called while I was folding onesies on the couch. I answered on the 3rd ring, because if I waited longer, she'd call my father, then Vivian, then I'd have 3 separate conversations about why I seemed overwhelmed. Hi, Corinne. Sweetheart, how are you sounding so tired in the middle of the day? I looked down at Ivy, asleep on a receiving blanket beside me. Because I have a 5-week-old well. That's exactly why I've been saying you need more people around you. I kept my voice even. We're doing fine. There was a pause, then that shift I know too well, the one where her concern starts organizing itself into plans. I've been talking with everyone, and we all agree you shouldn't be trying to do this in isolation. Everyone. The word landed wrong. I said, what exactly have you been talking about? Just practical things, she said. Schedules, support, what makes sense? We can help you get organized. Help me get organized. In my own house, I stared at the front door as if it had done something to offend me. Mom. I didn't ask anyone to arrange anything. You shouldn't have to ask, Corinne. That's what family is for. Anyway, we'll come by tomorrow around lunch. I'll bring Vivian and the kids. We can help a little. Before I could answer, she added, almost lightly, you really should leave a spare key with someone. It's not wise. A woman alone with a newborn. A woman alone. Not a homeowner. Not a mother. Not me. Just a category she could reduce. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. The house was quiet except for the refrigerator humming and Ivy's soft newborn breaths. Sunlight touched the violet on the sill. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower started up, and the sound drifted through the neighborhood like any normal suburban afternoon. In the western suburbs of Chicago. Good schools, church bulletin boards, tidy mulch beds, families who waved from driveways. I should have felt safe. Instead, I looked around at the unopened boxes, the bottle drying rack on the counter, the throw blanket folded over the arm of the couch. And something cold moved through me. It wasn't just that my mother was coming over. It was the way she had spoken, as if she and the others had already discussed the shape of my life without me. As if this house was not something I had bought, but something temporary, a waiting room until my family decided how it should function, as if the walls belonged to whoever spoke most confidently inside them. I stood up with Ivy in my arms and checked the lock on the front door locked. Chapter 2. My mother walked into my house like it was her thus. Then the handle turned before I made it halfway back to the couch. I had left the door unlatched because that was what decent families trained you to do. If someone said they were stopping by with food, you didn't make them stand on the porch, balancing foil pans and tote bags. You trusted the social contract. You trusted the words visit and help to mean what they were supposed to mean. My mother came in first, carrying a casserole dish wrapped in a blue striped towel from St. Mark's, like she was delivering mercy to the needy. She wore a cream cardigan, despite the warmth outside, and lipstick the color of roses left too long in water. Her eyes swept the entryway, then the living room, then the kitchen, taking inventory before she even looked at me. There's my girl, she said, in the tone people use when they are already displeased. Vivian followed with Sloane and Milo behind her, and my father came in last, with a reusable grocery bag, full of something that clinked glass on glass. Graham stepped in a beat later, phone in hand, gaze moving over the walls and trim and windows with a professional stillness that made my skin tighten. Not admiring. Assessing. Hi, I said. No one answered right away because my mother had already pivoted toward the kitchen. Oh, sweetheart, this is all still in boxes. We have got to get you functioning. She set the casserole on my counter and immediately moved the bottle drying rack 6 inches to the left. Then she picked up the electric bottle warmer and turned toward the outlet by the coffee maker. This should be over here, she said. You don't want to be reaching around hot things while holding the baby, Mom. She glanced back, smiling without softening. I'm just making it safer. Vivian gave me a small look that might have been apology or fatigue. Sloane hovered near the front hall, all long limbs and awkward awareness, while Milo was already staring at the staircase like. He wanted to know what every room looked like. My father put the bag down by the island and kissed my cheek. House looks nice, Corey. He said it quietly, as if compliments had to be smuggled in before my mother noticed. Graham gave me a nod. Nice place. Good light, good light. Like he was discussing resale, Ivy stirred in my arms, making that tiny snuffling sound newborns make when they are deciding whether to wake all the way up. My mother's whole face changed when she saw her. Not softer, exactly. More intent. Let me take her, she said. I shifted back before I meant to. She's fine. That pause did not escape anyone. My mother turned to the others as if nothing had happened. Vivian, maybe the kids can straighten up the den. Thomas, would you put those things in the fridge? Graham, can you have a look at that back door lock later? Corinne, honey, sit down. You look exhausted. I didn't sit. Why is everyone acting like we're setting up camp? My mother smoothed the towel from the casserole dish with careful fingers. Because we are going to help you get settled, and because someone needs to be practical. You just had a baby 5 weeks ago. You are not sleeping. You have no husband here. Your job is intense even when your life is simple, which at the moment it very much is not. So I'm going to stay for a while. The room went very still inside me. I said, you're going to what? Just temporarily. Until there's a real routine in place. Vivian may let the kids stay over a few days too, so the house has some life in it. And you're not rattling around here all alone. Milo looked delighted at the idea. Sloane looked mortified. Vivian finally spoke. Mom just means until things calm down. Things are calm, I said. My mother gave me that look she has always reserved for moments when I refuse to cooperate with my own correction. Corinne, a baby needs stability. I stared at her. Ivy made a small restless sound against my shoulder, and I bounced her instinctively, one palm warm against the back of her onesie. A baby also needs her mother, I said. Of course she does. My mother's voice stayed sweet. But a baby cannot grow up inside impulsive choices and exhaustion. You have always been wonderful at caring for other people, truly. But mothering is different. There it was. The incision she always used. Praise first. Then the cut. For one strange second, I was 12 years old again in our old kitchen. Being told I was capable but not reliable, compassionate but not realistic, bright but too sensitive to be trusted with final decisions. It is amazing how quickly a parent can shrink you without touching you. Graham wandered toward the dining area and looked into the office nook off the hall, where I had stacked binders, charting supplies, and my laptop bag. He said, almost conversationally, you may want to clear some of the work materials out of there, if this becomes a proper nursery setup. Proper nursery setup. In my house. I looked at him, and then at Vivian. She was pulling a package of wipes from her tote bag, like she wished she could disappear into the motion. No one is staying here, I said. No one is converting anything. I didn't ask for this. My father raised both hands a little, peace broker to the end. Your mother just wants to help. Help in my family always arrived, carrying terms and conditions. My mother turned away from me and opened a cabinet as if she had every right. These bottles should be lower, she said. You shouldn't have to reach. And where are the spare linens? If I'm in the guest room, I'll need to know where things are. You are not staying in the guest room. She shut the cabinet door harder than necessary and faced me fully. This is exactly the kind of rigidity I'm talking about. You are overtired and defensive, and instead of receiving support, you are making everything harder. It's my house, Mom. Her eyes sharpened. Is it? A house you bought while heavily pregnant, now newly postpartum, alone, with an infant, and a demanding schedule. You think that equals stability, because your name is on paperwork. Then she said the sentence that turned help into possession. If you won't let me stay, then you and Ivy can go to Vivian's for a few weeks. I'll stay here and make the house functional. The words hit harder because they landed near my own old fears. For one beat, I could hear Malik Turner asking if I was sure, hear every person who had mistaken male absence for female incompetence. I tightened my arm around Ivy. My name is on all the paperwork, yes. My mother's gaze dropped to the baby, not lovingly, evaluating. Ivy needs structure, Corinne. She needs adults making wise decisions. Adults, as if I were not one while standing in front of her holding my own child. Sloane shifted by the staircase and muttered, Mom, do we have to do this right now? Vivian looked at her too fast. Sloane. But I was grateful for the crack in the performance. Milo, oblivious, had found the hallway half-bath and was asking if the towel hooks were new. My father answered him with painful enthusiasm. Graham's phone buzzed. He checked it, then flipped it face down on my dining table. Sloane, without thinking, said, Dad, is that the hotel again? The room didn't explode. It didn't even visibly react at first. It just tightened in a different direction. Vivian's head turned. What hotel? Sloane's face changed immediately, teenage horror flooding in. Nothing. I just meant from before. Graham smiled the way practiced men do when they are selecting a version of reality. Work message. The Oak Brook account. We talked about this. Vivian held his face for a second too long, then looked down. Right. Okay, I saw it then. The hairline fracture. Not proof. Just strain. My mother moved in before silence could organize itself against her. We have bigger things to worry about than everyone's nerves. I've been up to my eyes dealing with your grandmother's situation. And frankly, I do not have the bandwidth for unnecessary drama from every direction. That made me look up fast. What situation? She waved a hand. Nora has not been herself. She's confused more often. Some days she barely knows what's going on. We're all juggling enough, so I need you to stop making this harder. Confused. That word lit up every clinical instinct I had. My grandmother, Nora, lived in Lombard in the brick ranch. She and my grandfather bought in 1972. Over the past few months, I had stopped by a handful of times between visits and shifts. There had been days she seemed foggy, yes, but not in a clean line. It wasn't the steady decline I was used to seeing. One Tuesday, she repeated herself 4 times in 20 minutes and could barely keep her eyes open. 3 days later, she beat me at gin rummy and complained in exquisite detail about the woman at Jewel who squeezed avocados like they were stress balls. I had noticed a blue pill organizer on the kitchen counter I didn't recognize. I had noticed how sedated she looked some afternoons, how oddly clear she was on others. It had not felt natural. What do you mean confused? I asked. My mother's chin lifted. I mean exactly what I said. Things are being handled by who? Graham answered this one, calm and smooth. We've put the right paperwork in motion. It's under control. Something cold slid through me. What paperwork? Vivian looked at him, then at me. Her color had changed. Graham. My mother cut across all of it. Your grandmother cannot manage alone anymore, and none of us have time for emotional reactions every time a sensible decision is made. I looked from her to Graham. Handled, in motion, sensible. Those are dangerous words when spoken around old people and money. My father had gone very interested in unloading containers from the grocery bag. Pasta salad, tea, a jar of pickles no one needed. I took one step toward the island. Ivy woke fully and let out a thin, offended cry, but I barely felt the movement of rocking her. What sensible decision? Exactly. No one answered. Then I saw it. A manila folder had slipped half out of Graham's leather briefcase where he had set it beside a dining chair. Maybe it happened when he turned his phone over. Maybe it had been there the whole time. On top was a white sheet with a brokerage logo, and beneath it a listing printout. I could see enough without touching it. Lombard, Illinois. Protry address ending in my grandmother's street number. Projected closing date 06/21/2024. For a second everything in the room went flat. The way sound does when grief enters before your brain can name it. I heard my own voice come out low and sharp. Are you selling Nora's house? Silence hit the room so cleanly, even Milo stopped talking. My mother was the first to recover. We are doing what is best for her. I looked at Graham. He didn't flinch. It's already in motion. I turned to my father then, because some animal part of me still wanted one person in that room to say no, to laugh and tell me I misunderstood, to be better than he had always been, but he only lowered his eyes to the counter, and in that small, careful surrender, I understood this was no longer about boundaries or casseroles or my mother trying to move into my house and parent over me. This was something colder, and they had already started chapter 3. I knew my grandmother wasn't forgetting. She was being erased. The folder on the chair blurred at the edges, but my mind did not. By July of last year, I had known I was pregnant. By 10 weeks, Noah was gone. By October, Nora had fallen in her kitchen. And everyone started saying the same phrase in the same solemn voice, like they had rehearsed it on the drive over. She's going downhill fast. But real cognitive decline did not usually move like that. Not when I had spent years watching it up close. It had rhythms, frayed loops. Slow dimming, bright pockets, then less and less of them. Nora was not steady, no. From late 2023 into the first months of 2024, she had stretches where she drifted. Yes, but then she would come sharply back. Enough to beat me at cards. Enough to complain about the state of produce at Jewel. Enough to squeeze my hand 3 times, our old signal from when I was little and scared in church, and needed to know someone saw me. 3 squeezes meant I'm here. What made my skin crawl was not that she had become confused. It was when. How often it seemed to happen right before an appointment, or church, or visitors, or papers. Later, once I started pulling at threads, I found the first one had been laid long before the fall. Power of attorney. Dated 03/19/2023, months before October. Before anyone was telling me Nora could not manage. Before there was a dramatic turning point to point at and say, see, this is why. Planning, my mother called it when I asked. Just prudent paperwork, but people who exploit older adults do not start with the big theft. They start with a reasonable form. A calm explanation. A day when everyone in the room acts like your questions are embarrassing. The notarization had been done by Harold Finch, an independent notary whose name I did not know then, and would never forget later. When I mentioned the date to Nora one afternoon in February, she stared at the tablecloth for so long I thought she had lost the thread. Then she said, very quietly, I kept asking what day it was. Nobody answered me straight. I had gone still. She shook her head once. They made me feel foolish for asking again. That sentence sat in my chest like a stone. The blue pill organizer on her kitchen windowsill was what first made my professional instincts sit up. I had noticed it in late October, when I stopped by after a shift, still nauseous in that old pregnancy way, where even coffee smelled punitive. The times written on the compartments had been shifted. A medication that should have been occasional had been used like routine. One sedating drug made no sense to me at the frequency I was seeing. Another had anticholinergic effects strong enough to worsen confusion in an older adult. I did not need to be a geriatrician to recognize medication fog. When it was sitting under fluorescent light in a ranch kitchen with half a sandwich drying on a plate. When I asked my mother about it, she snapped before I got halfway through the second sentence. You always think you know better than everyone else. I know what over-medication looks like. You know enough to be arrogant. Graham had been there that day, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe with that maddening stillness of his. He said nothing. But I saw the flicker in his face. He knew I had noticed something real. I needed someone outside the family, and family was exactly what made Marisol Vega hesitate. Marisol had been helping with Nora part-time, a CNA with tired eyes and practical hands, who moved through rooms quietly, as if trying not to leave evidence of herself. The first time I asked if she had concerns about Nora's meds, she looked straight at the sink. I can't get involved. I'm not asking you to accuse anyone. People say that and then somehow I'm the one in trouble. She had rent to pay. A son in middle school. A daughter in community college. There are people who can afford principles in dramatic gestures and people who cannot. I knew better than to confuse fear with indifference, so I went back. Twice. Brought coffee one morning. Helped carry in groceries another. The third time, she shut the front door behind us and kept her voice low. I wrote things down because the schedule kept changing. My pulse jumped. You kept a log. She nodded once. Medication times, if she slept, if she was alert. If someone told me to give something earlier because there would be company or an appointment. Who told you? She looked at me then, really looked. Sometimes your mother, sometimes instructions came through other people. I don't know who decided first. Do you still have it? Some of it. She swallowed. I took pictures of a few pages and sent them to my daughter. In case. In case what? In case one day everyone says I imagined it. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was being paranoid. I took what I had to Dr. Ethan Caldwell, one of the few geriatricians I trusted not to perform certainty where caution belonged. I showed him the med list, the timing patterns, my notes, the fragments Marisol had shared. He read without speaking for a long minute, then took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. I can't diagnose from fragments and second-hand reports, he said. But yes, this is consistent with medication-induced cognitive impairment. The room felt too warm. You mean enough to make her seem incompetent. I mean enough to cloud her. Enough to make recall unreliable. Enough to worsen confusion if the wrong medications were used in the wrong combinations at the wrong times. I stared at the page in front of him. He went on more softly. The dangerous part is that someone can still appear intermittently functional. And if they're made just foggy enough, they can be walked into signing something they won't fully process and may not remember clearly afterward. That sentence chased me for weeks. Other people had seen pieces too. Edie Lawson from next door told me Nora still came out to fuss at squirrels in January and could recite the garbage pickup schedule better than the village website. Don't let anybody tell you she was gone, Edie said, arms folded over her winter coat. Some days she was sharper than me. Caleb Mercer, my cousin and an EMT who noticed more than he said, gave me another piece over gas station coffee. It was weirdly patterned, he said, like every time there was a banker or church person or paperwork, she'd be zonked. Then other days she'd ask me about my blood pressure and tell me to stop eating gas station taquitos. I almost laughed. Instead, I wrote it down. Then there was February. I was 7 months pregnant, tired enough that my bones felt porous. At Vivian's house after a family dinner I regretted attending before dessert was served. Graham had stepped out to take a call. His second phone slid half out from between couch cushions. When Miso launched himself after the dog, I picked it up automatically. The screen lit before I could help it. A hotel notification, a boutique place downtown. A text banner with the name Tessa. Another notification for a purchase I knew Vivian would never make because she still thought $400 candles were a sign of moral decay. Graham came back into the room and took the phone from my hand too quickly. Work, he said. I looked at him. On a second phone. His smile was all polished surface. You, of all people, should understand client confidentiality. At the time I clocked the affair first, because that was the loudest explanation. But what stayed with me was not sex. It was separation. A hidden device meant hidden channels, hidden accounts, hidden spending, hidden versions of reality. Later, When I thought about Vivian, I understood her differently than I wanted to. She had seen some of it. Charges that did not fit. Gifts that made no sense. Distance dressed up as stress. When she asked, he told her she did not understand finances. If she pushed harder, he made her feel juvenile for asking. Vivian was not innocent exactly. She had benefited all her life from things being managed for her, but she was not the architect either. She had simply been trained not to look too closely at structures built by men in good shoes. Once the house listing surfaced, I stopped trying to solve it alone. Naomi Bell met me in an office that smelled faintly of paper, coffee, and expensive skepticism. She was compact, immaculate, and so unsentimental I trusted her within 3 minutes. I brought everything. Medication notes, dates, Marisol's partial logs, my timeline, the listing printout, the POA date, the account names I had managed to piece together from statements Nora once left in a basket by the phone. Naomi read in silence long enough to make me feel 12 again. Then she set the pages down in a neat stack. If this is what it looks like, she said, they didn't just move a house. They moved a person out of her own life. My throat tightened. Can we stop them? We do not start by asking them to explain themselves. We start with paper. She tapped the stack once. Every transfer, every signature, every change in authority, every medication reconciliation, every advisory fee, every property action. She brought in Lydia Boone for a preliminary forensic review. Lydia had the blunt concentration of someone who did not find numbers abstract in the least. She found them intimate, almost biological. 2 days later, I sat in Naomi's office again, with Ivy asleep against my chest, and heard the number that changed the shape of everything. Lydia turned a spreadsheet toward us. So far, she said, the amount we can preliminarily identify as diverted, improperly transferred, excessively charged, or otherwise abused is $436,850. I actually thought I had misheard her. Naomi said nothing. Lydia continued, practical as weather. That includes investment account draws, depletion of cash reserves, discretionary transfers under the POA, advisory fee abuse, and recurring hotel and luxury gift charges, totaling roughly $38,400. Hotel charges. Tessa, the room tilted for a second, not from surprise but from scale. He had not just been cheating on Vivian, he had been financing it. And not with secret commissions or some side pool of money that was merely marital betrayal. With Nora, my grandmother's money had paid for flowers, rooms, dinners, gifts, and whatever else made Big Graham feel entitled to a second life. The house was not the crime. It was one room in the house of it. I looked down at Ivy's sleeping face and then back at the spreadsheet, all those lines and dates and coded descriptions trying to disguise appetite as administration. They were eating her alive, I said. Naomi's expression did not change, but her voice softened by 1/2 a degree. Maybe, but from this point forward, we stay precise. She slid the papers back into order. No family confrontation, no accusations by phone, no emotional speeches in kitchens, paper trail first. I nodded, because if I opened my mouth too fast, fury would come out instead of language. Outside, the afternoon light across the parking lot was brutally ordinary. A woman loaded groceries into a minivan. Someone laughed near the elevators. My phone buzzed in my bag with 3 missed calls from my mother, and 1 text from Vivian that read only, "Are you okay?" I stood there with my daughter against my chest, the weight of her small body anchoring me to the pavement, and understood that whatever happened next would not be settled by who cried hardest or lied smoothest at a dining room table. It would be settled by what they had touched, signed, billed, transferred, hidden, and spent. And for the first time since I saw that folder on the chair, I had a direction sharp enough to follow. Chapter 4 paper. Trail first. Naomi moved fast enough to make panic feel amateur. By the next morning she had a yellow pad full of dates, a legal assistant requesting records, and a tone that suggested the world was made of people who either documented things or regretted not documenting them. We revoke the power of attorney. She said it like she was setting a glass on a table. we moved to halt any property transfer tied to Nora's residence in Lombard. If the projected closing is June 21st, we get in front of it now, not the day before. We request bank records, brokerage records, listing communications, advisories, caregiver notes, medication reconciliations, everything we can put our hands on. I had expected a speech about family pain, maybe some soft warning about how ugly these cases got. Instead, she looked at me and said, "From now on, I want dates, times, names, copies. Not impressions unless you mark them as impressions. Facts first. Your anger can sit in the passenger seat, but it does not drive." That was, strangely, a mercy. Justice, at least the kind available to ordinary people, was not dramatic at first. It was forms, certified mail, release authorizations, subpoenas, and the grim dignity of paper accumulating faster than excuses. Lydia Boone kept peeling back layers I had not known were there. Fee siphoning disguised as routine management. Reallocations that made no practical sense for Nora's age and needs. Recurring hotel charges. Gift cards. Jewelry purchases. Wires that moved in patterns too neat to be accidental. She sat across from me with two monitors open, one finger moving line by line down a spreadsheet. These charges repeat twice a month, on average for almost 5 months. I shifted Ivy higher on my shoulder. The hotel. Lydia nodded. "And this name shows up in associated booking correspondence." She turned the screen enough for me to read it. Tessa Rowe. Not a rumor. Not a perfume on a collar. Not my imagination attaching itself to a second phone and making a story. Because stories are easier than numbers. A real person with a real link to real charges paid with money that had been bled out of Nora's accounts under cover of authority. I felt heat creep up my throat. He used her money. Lydia's expression did not move. That is what the record suggests. Humiliation has textures. There was betrayal, yes, there was outrage, but there was also the specific obscenity of a man dressing theft in professional language, while using an elderly woman's money to finance his own vanity. Apps opened a file within the week. Investigator Dana Pruitt came to Naomi's office, first and later to my house. She was plain-spoken, mid-40s maybe, with a face that gave away nothing, and eyes that missed very little. She asked questions in clean lines and let silence do its work. "When did you first suspect medication mismanagement?" "Late October." "What made you suspect it?" "The organizer, the timing, the frequencies, the sedation pattern." Then the appointments lined up too neatly with the confusion. She wrote that down. "Did Nora ever express fear?" "Not directly at first. Shame before fear." She said people made her feel foolish for asking what day it was, and later she said she remembered asking what she was signing. Dana looked up. "Who was present?" "I know of at least my mother, possibly Graham, possibly my father for transport on one occasion, maybe more. Marisol met with her too, so did Edie." Caleb gave a statement. By then, Naomi had also filed a compliance complaint against Hartwell Ridge Advisory Group, and sent a report to the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. Another packet went to the County Elder Exploitation Unit for review. On paper, it looked boring. In real life, it felt like a siege. My father came apart more quietly than everyone else. I met Thomas at a diner off Roosevelt Road, because he said he did not want to talk at the house. He looked older than he had 3 weeks earlier. Not frail exactly, just used up around the edges. He stirred coffee he wasn't drinking. I didn't know what all Graham was doing. That is not the same thing as not knowing anything. His spoon stopped. He looked at the tabletop. "Your mother said it was easier if we handled paperwork, while Nora was in a good window." "A good window." He flinched a little at my tone. "I drove her once, maybe twice." "To sign what?" "I don't know exactly." I laughed once, with no humor in it. "You keep saying that like it helps." She was asking questions, repeating herself. "I thought," he stopped. "You thought what?" "I thought Graham knew what he was doing. He works in finance." Elaine said they were trying to protect things before your grandmother got worse. I leaned back and looked at him. Really looked. Did she ask what she was signing? His silence answered before he did. Finally, he said, very low, yes. The diner noise kept going around us. Plates, ice in glasses, someone laughing too loudly near the register, and you sat there. Thomas closed his eyes for a second. I should have said something. That has been your life's work, Dad, standing still long enough for other people to do damage. And then calling yourself peaceful, because you never raised your voice. He went pale. I hated myself a little as soon as the words left me, mostly because they were true. I never hit you. I never. I said, that's the problem. You want credit for the violence you didn't do while ignoring the harm you kept making room for. He had no answer to that. Nora improved, but not like in a movie where one medication adjustment and one loving speech restore everything stolen. It came in flashes that held longer than before. Fewer dead spots, more continuity from one afternoon to the next. Enough that Dana Pruitt could interview her on a good day and get something steadier than fragments. I sat with her afterward in the den, while sunlight lay across the carpet in bars, through the blinds. Her hands were thinner than I remembered from childhood, all tendon and paper skin, but when she reached for mine the squeeze was still there, 3 times. I'm here. They talked over me, she said. I swallowed hard. I know. She looked toward the window. I don't remember all of it, but I remember the feeling, like I'd become furniture in my own house. She took a breath. I asked what I was signing, and nobody answered straight. There it was again, simple and unbearable. Older adults do not just lose money when they are exploited. They lose the right to ask a question and receive an honest answer. That, more than the balance sheets, was what made it monstrous. Vivian came over on a Thursday evening, after Sloane's softball practice. She stood in my kitchen with both hands, wrapped around a mug she never drank from, while I laid out a narrowed version of the records. Not everything, enough hotel charges, gift purchases, transfers tied back to accounts held under Nora's name or authority, dates, amounts, booking patterns. Vivian stared until her mascara started to smudge at the corners. No, I did not soften it. Yes, he told me I was paranoid. Her voice cracked on the last word. He said I didn't understand how business expenses looked before reimbursement. I almost said of course he did. Instead, I stayed quiet. She sank into the chair slowly, like her knees had stopped trusting the floor. Sloane heard us fighting in March, she said. She asked me why Dad needed a private phone for work if he worked mostly from home. I looked down at the papers. I'm not showing you this to punish you. I know why you're showing me. She laughed once, then covered her mouth. God, Corinne. He used Grandma's money. There was no quick bridge between us. I loved her. I was furious with her. I understood things about her that did not excuse them. All of that was true at once. I am sorry for what this is, I said, but I'm not going to pretend you didn't benefit from not looking. She nodded, tears sliding free now. I know. It mattered that she did not defend him. It mattered that she did not run straight back to Elaine with the stack in her hand. It was not redemption. It was only the first honest thing. At church, the temperature changed before the weather did. No one publicly shamed my mother. St. Mark's was too polished for that. But Pastor Ann Crowley began keeping conversations brief. The old automatic warmth cooled into formality. Meal-train women, who once would have flooded our family with casseroles and scripture, now sent careful texts instead of appearing at the door. People who had always treated Elaine like a woman, carved for leadership, started looking at her the way parishioners look at a cracked stained glass window. With discomfort sharpened by superstition. For some people, money is never the deepest wound. Reputation is. By early June, Naomi had the shape of a plan. We do not meet them in public, she said. Public gives performers too much room. We do not warn them when service is coming. We let them arrive where they still think they control the emotional weather. My house, I said. She nodded. Dana Pruitt would be there. Naomi would be there. A process server would stay nearby until the timing was right. The point was not theatrics. The point was structure. If my mother came in, ready to bulldoze, there would be witnesses. If Graham lied, there would be paper within arm's reach. If they tried to recast me as unstable, exhausted, hormonal, vindictive, there would be a state investigator sitting 10 feet away taking notes. For the first time in my life, I was not preparing to endure my family. I was preparing to remove the spaces where they usually hid. That morning I straightened the living room twice and hated myself for caring. Ivy went down for her nap after 11, one fist curled near her cheek, breath soft, and even through the monitor. I left the front door unlatched, because old habits in my family were as reliable as gravity. Elaine never really knocked when she believed a room belonged to her. Naomi sat at my dining table, with 3 folders stacked in exact alignment. Dana stood by the window for a moment, then took the armchair where she could see the entryway. The house smelled faintly of laundry detergent and coffee gone lukewarm. "You okay?" Dana asked. "No," I said, "but I'm ready." Naomi closed the top folder and rested her palm on it. "Good. Ready matters more." For one strange, suspended minute, everything was quiet. The baby monitor hummed. A sprinkler clicked somewhere outside. Then, through the front window, I heard tires on the driveway, the low crunch of gravel at the edge, a car door opening, then another. My whole body went still. Chapter 5. They came to take over. They left served the door opened before anyone knocked. My mother came in first carrying a large canvas tote, printed with pale blue ducks. The kind of bag people used when they wanted their intrusion to look like help. Behind her, Graham followed with 2 storage bins, Thomas with a folded pack-and-play under one arm, and Vivian with Sloane and her younger son, trailing close enough to make the whole thing look domestic, harmless, ordinary. It was almost elegant, the way they had arranged themselves into innocence. Elaine smiled when she saw me in the kitchen with Ivy on my hip. "There you are. We brought a few things to get you set up properly. I told everyone if we waited for you to ask, we'd still be waiting in July." She set the tote on my counter like she was laying claim. I looked at the bins, the planner tucked under her arm, the pack-and-play my father was still holding, because no one had told him where to put it yet. The old choreography. Arrive fast, fill the space, create a new reality before anyone has time to object. My mother took one glance around my house and clicked into the same tone she had used my entire life. "I've thought a lot about this. You cannot do this alone, Corinne. Not well. The baby needs structure. You need oversight. We're going to help you establish a routine and get this house functioning the way it should." Ivy shifted against me, warm and solid. Elaine kept going. "You've been emotional for months, and now with everything going on with Nora, this is exactly why family has to step in. Ivy needs a real family around her. If you cannot accept that," she said, "then you and Ivy can leave for a few weeks. While I set things right here." Something in me noticed, almost clinically, that she still thought she was walking into a vacuum she could fill. I said nothing until she had finished building the scaffold of authority around herself. Then I looked at her and said, "You are not moving into my house." The room changed a degree. Her smile held, but only just. "Don't be dramatic. No one here is going to control my daughter. And what you did to Nora ends today." Graham set the bins down carefully. Too carefully. The controlled motion of a man buying himself 1 second to calculate. Elaine gave a short laugh. "I really think you should hear yourself. When you isolate and let your imagination run wild." Naomi stepped out from the dining room before I had to answer. "I don't believe imagination is the issue here." For the first time, my mother's face emptied. Dana stood up from the armchair then. Badge visible, notebook already in hand. Investigator Dana Pruitt, Adult Protective Services. "I'm here in connection with an active exploitation investigation involving Nora Whitaker." No one spoke. A man I had almost forgotten was waiting outside, appeared in the open doorway behind them. Mid-50s, neutral expression, manila envelopes in hand. Graham Hart, Elaine Mercer, Thomas Mercer. He passed the papers over one by one, with the dull efficiency of weather. "You've been served." The silence after that was not family silence. Not sulking, not moral pressure, not the heavy theatrical pause my mother used before delivering punishment. This was institutional silence, the kind that comes when private behavior suddenly has a file number. Graham recovered first. I'm sure this can be cleared up quickly. There's been a misunderstanding about my advisory role and discretionary authority with certain accounts. Naomi did not raise her voice. Nora has signed a revocation of the power of attorney you relied on, and we have filed an emergency petition to halt the transfer of her residence in Lombard, pending capacity review, including the March 14, 2023 signing event. We are also seeking a full accounting of investment reallocations, fees, cash reserve drawdowns, and all transfers executed under your authority. Graham's jaw tightened. That authority was valid. We contest that, Naomi said. We also contest whether Ms. Whitaker had adequate capacity when documents were presented, whether material terms were explained, and whether undue influence was present. Elaine looked from one face to another, already trying to sort what she knew from what she had never asked. This is absurd. Graham was helping, I said. He moved $436,850 in patterns that don't align with Nora's needs, age, or care plan. Even saying the number out loud felt unreal and precise at the same time. Vivian made a small sound behind her hand. Naomi opened the top folder. That total includes approximately $38,400 in recurring hotel, gifts, jewelry, and associated personal expenses unsupported by any legitimate reimbursement trail. Graham took one step forward. You have no context for those charges. Actually, Lydia Boone gave us quite a lot of context, I said. His eyes flicked to me then, and for the first time I saw fear arrive without enough time to hide itself. I kept going. Twice monthly hotel patterns for almost 5 months. Booking correspondence linked to Tessa Rowe. Vivian went white. No, she whispered, but it was not denial. It was impact. Elaine turned sharply toward Graham. Who is Tessa Rowe? He did not answer fast enough. The answer was in his face anyway. My mother stared at him like a floorboard had given way under her feet. Whatever she had justified to herself about financial strategy, estate planning, difficult decisions, this had no polished language left to cover it. Elder money routed into hotel rooms and gifts for a woman whose name did not belong in any advisory file. Dana spoke into the break. We also have witness statements regarding medication timing, confusion around appointments, and repeated instances in which Nora Whitaker asked what she was signing and did not receive a direct answer. Thomas looked down at the pack and play still in his hand, as if he had only just realized how obscene it was to be holding nursery furniture in the middle of this. Naomi pulled out another page. We are reviewing notarial participation by Harold Finch in connection with the March signing. At this point, we are not alleging he directed the scheme, but we are examining whether he notarized documents under circumstances that should have prompted more scrutiny of competency and voluntariness. Shh. Graham tried one last time for professional calm. Nora had fluctuating memory issues. Yes, but that does not void every planning decision she made. No, Naomi said. Theft does that quite nicely on its own. The words landed so cleanly they almost felt gentle. My mother found her voice again, though not her footing. Corinne, whatever grievances you have, this is still family. You do not do this like this. I looked at her and felt, not nothing, but less than I once would have, less fear, less reflex. This is exactly how I do it. Because every time it stayed inside the family, you used privacy like a weapon. Sloane had moved closer to Vivian by then, old enough to understand disaster. Even if she could not pass the paperwork, Vivian put an arm around her without taking her eyes off Graham. You told me it was reimbursement, she said. You told me I was paranoid. Graham said her name in a warning tone. Don't, she laughed once, broken and furious. No, don't you? Not now. I turned to my father. Did you know? She asked what she was signing. His whole face crumpled inward. Corinne, did you know? Yes, he said. The word hung there, small and fatal. I nodded once and you sat there anyway. He swallowed. I didn't think it was this bad. That was always how you survived, I said. By calling damage something smaller until it was too late to stop, he had no defense left. The pack-and-play slipped slightly in his grip, and he set it down by the wall like a burden he could no longer pretend was useful. There was movement in the hallway then. Slow, careful, supported. Marisol appeared first, one hand at Nora's elbow. I had not known Naomi arranged it that way, or maybe I had known she might, and simply refused to hope for too much. The whole room turned. Nora was not strong. She was not theatrical. She was wearing a soft grey cardigan and sensible shoes, and her face looked carved by fatigue. But her eyes were clear. Marisol guided her to the chair near the doorway. I crossed the room with Ivy and knelt beside her. Her fingers found mine and pressed 3 times. "I'm here." Then she looked directly at Graham. "I did not agree to sell my house." No one interrupted her. She turned her gaze to Elaine, then Thomas, and there was more sorrow in it than fury. I asked what I was signing. "You all heard me." My father closed his eyes. Nora breathed in, steadying. "I want Corinne to speak for me now." Dana wrote that down in plain, official strokes. Naomi slid a prepared designation across the table for execution later, properly, carefully, with witnesses who understood the meaning of the word witness. Nothing in the room recovered after that. People did not collapse dramatically. No one confessed in a monologue. That is not how real ruin works. It happens in narrowing options. Dana informed Graham that further contact regarding Nora's finances was to go through counsel. Naomi told Elaine and Thomas that any attempt to interfere with Nora's residence, records, or care arrangements would be documented and added to the file. Vivian gathered her children with hands that shook, but did not hesitate. She did not ask Graham for an explanation again. Whatever she needed to know, she knew enough. My mother stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the baby things she had brought to colonize it, and seemed, for the first time in my life, uncertain of where she was allowed to put her hands. She looked at me. "You're choosing strangers over your family." I shifted Ivy higher and answered the truth. "No. I'm choosing the people who told the truth when family wouldn't. They left in pieces, not literally, just separately. Graham first, jaw set hard enough to crack a tooth. Vivian after him with the kids. Thomas carrying nothing this time. Elaine last, because she had built her whole life on the belief that if she stayed in a doorway long enough, the room would bend back toward her. It didn't. By August, the sale of Nora's house was voided. The court imposed oversight. Graham lost access to every account tied to her name, and later lost his position at Hartwell Ridge, after the compliance review became impossible to bury. There were civil penalties, restitution orders, and a referral that moved beyond anything our family could privately contain. We recovered a good portion of the money, not all of it. Real life rarely hands back every dollar and every hour, but enough was traced, frozen, and clawed back to matter. Harold Finch received sanctions and a formal reprimand. Not a mastermind, just a man who had treated a signature like a ritual instead of a responsibility. Vivian filed for separation before the leaves turned. I did not celebrate it, I just respected the honesty. Thomas started visiting Nora under supervision at first, quiet and ashamed. Sometimes she saw him, sometimes she didn't want to. That was her right. Elaine stopped calling every day, then every week. Reputation had finally cost her something love never had. As for Ivy's father, there was no miracle there either. He remained what he had been. Absent, occasional. A voice from far away with no real claim on the life he had helped create. In the end, that truth was easier to live with than a false promise would have been. Nora never became who she had been before, but she became more fully herself again. Some afternoons she remembered recipes, old hymns, the names of long-dead dogs. Some days she still drifted. Healing was not reversal, it was dignity returned in increments. One evening in early fall, she sat on my porch with a blanket over her knees, while Ivy slept inside, and the air smelled faintly of leaves and cold earth. She reached for my hand and pressed 3 times. I pressed back. For a long time, I thought survival meant learning how much harm I could endure without breaking. I know better now. Sometimes survival is a paper trail. Sometimes it is a witness. Sometimes it is saying no while holding your child. And letting the people who came to take over leave, carrying their own names in legal envelopes. If you've ever had to choose truth over family silence or rebuild after someone called control love, you already know how hard won that kind of peace is. Tell me in the comments. I think more of us know that story than we say out loud.